Hello and welcome to BT Media's In Conversation With series. Today I'm delighted to welcome Saul Leese, Business Director of ShowShoppa, a curated multi-vendor e-commerce platform for event organisers and media owners. Good morning, Saul.
Morning, mate. How are you?
I'm good. What part of the world are you in today?
I'm actually in High Peak, I'm in High Peak.
High Peak?
It's kind of Derbyshire, really. It's the Peak District.
Okay.
So I'm actually in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by sort of hills and mountains, which is
right. What's here if they put you in, even though you're in the middle of nowhere?
Well, I can't swear, can I, on this? They put me in tier 3 because I'm sort of semi-bolted onto Manchester, sadly. Manchester's 16 miles down the road.
Right.
But you know, the actual COVID levels in my immediate area probably almost nothing, because no one lives here.
Well, we're gonna come and talk about that and the government. So obviously you're at ShowShoppa, but clearly you've had a wide and varied history or career, shall I say, both in events and outside. Can you, for our viewers, it'd be great if you could sort of bring that to life, actually, and then how you ended up doing what you're doing at the moment.
Yeah, sure. I mean, basically, I started out in. Funny enough, I've only been working in events just a little bit longer than you, Dan. I've been in events about 9 years.
Right.
Before that, I actually started out my career in computer games.
Oh, right.
And actually, when I think about it, I've been in marketing around 27 years.
Yeah.
But I first started out in computer games, and I started working for a company called Mindscape.
Okay.
Which at that time, back in about 1993, they were the second biggest CD seller globally. Right. And I had a whole pile of different weird and wonderful games. I headed up the marketing on the Chessmaster series. Also looked after marketing for a guy called Chuck Krugel, who sounds like some sort of
great name.
An 80s sort of flick.
Yeah, it's like Steven Seagal.
He was the president of SSI, which was strategic software games, basically, and I looked after loads of really techie, nerdy stuff like Panzer General. So my early career was surrounded by kind of strategy and strategic products, and I really loved it. And then I moved over from there to I got headhunted to join Max's, which later became Electronic Arts, or rather Electronic Arts engulfed Max's, and I was launching the Sim products, which obviously later became The Sims, but early incarnations of that was SimCity 2000. Don't know if you played that.
Yeah, well, it's actually interesting because a lot of we'll come and talk about this. Some of the virtual event platforms are sort of, you can walk around the event and that sort of thing. So that, for me, reminded me of almost that time.
Yeah. I mean, amazing products, and and then I had some really weird sort of like ancillary products like Sim Farm, Sim Ant, Sim Tower. I launched this whole kind of range of products.
Yeah.
Which was great fun. We sold a lot of copies. I think we sold 5 million units of SimCity 2000 back then, which is pretty good. And then I ended up working on a whole pile of sports titles after that, and I launched a range of football titles as well. And I had the pleasure of working with. At one point, I was working with 18 Premier League managers.
Oh wow! Okay.
At the same time, so I was the first guy to sign Sir Alex Ferguson, and funny enough, he'd just done a Pepsi deal, and then after that, I signed Sir Alex Ferguson.
Yeah.
I also worked with Sven-Goran Eriksson as well. I remember his agent, a guy called Athol Still, based in Primrose Hill, who was the agent for Pavarotti, ran me up one day and said, "I'm just about to sign a contract with the FA." With Sven-Goran Eriksson, he's yours if you want him. So I parted with 80 grand and signed Sven in the hope that he might lead us to a victory, which sadly he didn't. But so we had a lot of fun, and I kind of ended up working with loads of Arsenal players and various other people like that. And then I basically moved back to London. I thought, because I've been living over in East Kent for a while, and I came back to London. I chatted to one of my old recruitment consultants. I said, I don't know what I want to do now. And she said, well, look, we've got a job at UBM, which was back in 2011. And she said, I got a marketing manager job in the built environment, working on Decorex and interiors. So I got the job, started working on those shows, had a great time, absolutely loved Decorex, fantastic product. Have you ever been?
I haven't, no, but I know of it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, a lot of fun, and met a lot of interesting people there. Some of which I stay in contact with. And then I got a phone call from your mate Rob Nathan, who was interested, who was hiring for, who were looking for someone to head up the marketing on a recent acquisition that they had acquired from Reed, called 100% Design. And I said to Rob, yeah, I'm up for it. And then I remember just thinking, what have I actually taken on? Because at that time, 100% Design was absolutely on its knees. I think, it didn't cost Media 10 a huge amount of money, but the brand was completely, the visitor numbers have gone from like 35,000 and dropped to about 16,000. And in that 6 months while I was there on that particular show, we managed to come in with a first ABC of over 25,000.
Wow.
So we were absolutely over the moon that we managed to turn around a brand that had actually completely lost its footing in the marketplace. It lost credibility. People were just walking away from it. And designers are some of the hardest people to sell to. Architects and interior designers, it has to be ultra cool, and it's got to be on trend. So that was something that I really enjoyed doing, turning that show around. And then, of course, after that, I started looking after quite a few other products. And one of the ones that I enjoyed launching was Design Shanghai. And again, that was a fairly short time span. I think we worked on that for about 7 months.
Yeah.
But that proved to be a huge success for Media 10. And of course, as you know, I think last year they sold it to Clarion for a fairly hefty amount of cash.
Good timing, it turned out.
I thought, well, yeah, the timing could be better. For Mr. Newton, but it was an incredible time, and we had a lot of fun on that show. I'm sure we'll probably talk about that at some point.
Yeah, and I guess that sort of gave you the bug for shows. Obviously, that was your first foray into it.
Exactly. Working on Decorex, connecting with design communities, staying on trends, delivering really strong visually based messaging was absolutely vital. So it's learning to say less and speak through imagery rather than lots and lots of words, which would seem to be the case around then. When I was working at UBM, I used to write emails about sort of about this long, So it was a really nice, refreshing entry into the event arena. And
then obviously you had a stint at Exhibition News as well, which would have been great.
Absolutely, I absolutely love that. My stint at EM was a really happy one, and I spoke to Julian a few weeks ago. He's an incredible ambassador for the industry. Martin Fullon over there is absolutely hammering it. He's flying the flag for the industry, and he's doing a really credible job. But at EN, it was a whole host of new challenges, and I started firing off warning signals quite early on in my tenure at Media 10. At EN. Mainly around, I started picking out on looking at Brexit. And of course, you remember before the pandemic, everyone was talking about Brexit.
Yeah.
And I started talking to Number 10, talking to various people within government and asking really simple questions like, for example, do you actually recognize our industry? And do you understand the scale and size of our industry and how many people it employs? And at that time, the government couldn't really sort of answer it. I asked very simple questions. I even asked.
What's this, about 3 years ago? Just to give it some.
No. This is at the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah. Okay. Fine.
January.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
This is before pre-pandemic, so this is in January, before the break, the pandemic. But I started to investigate and look at how the government kind of perceived us, and there were a number of organisations and bodies that were connected to government. But I remember looking at the I think it's called the Event Industry Development Plan.
Yeah.
Or strategy. And I gleefully opened it thinking that this is going to be something really wonderful. And my heart sank because it was about 15, maybe 20 pages long. And it only promised around £300,000 worth of support for our industry. Right. And when I started to think a bit more about that, I started to look at other industries. So I just wanted to make sure that, you know, the exhibition industry was getting its fair share. And I then looked at sort of Theresa May's industrial strategy from 2017, which is a 300-odd page, fairly lengthy strategic document. And in there, it talks about key industries that the Conservative government at that time felt were really vital to the growth and success of our country post-Brexit.
Yeah.
So looking at that, I realised that actually the government have been offering numerous multi-billion-pound incentives to various industries, from manufacturing to farming, and you know, with additional cash injections and support for those industries, training, skills, all that kind of stuff. You know, right down to university level. But actually, all they could offer us was 300 grand.
Yeah, I mean,
it's worth 190 billion in trading.
Yeah,
billion in
which just, and as we know, that followed on in terms of how they sort of saw and reacted to our industry, and obviously lumped it in with hospitality, and you know, I've studied Chris Keith and many others, and you know, and you find out the hospitality industry's got sort of 7 full-time lobbyists, and they've always had that. And so it's no shock that the government have responded in, I guess, the way that they have, actually, when you start thinking about it in detail.
I mean, Dan, it's an absolute joke, and it still is a joke. And, you know, they've still got a long way to go. And I remember sending some questions to Boris Johnson via Wayne at Number 10, and he never responded. And it was really simple stuff. Like, for example, you know, what are the kind of 5, 6, 7 big industries in the UK? And don't you think it's about time you reorganised your cabinet so you had leaders for those respective industries rather than kind of grouping together, or ministers sharing different roles? You know, so you can't really get any sort of action, you know, or decisive action around individual sectors. And it's kind of a no-brainer. And if you're going into like heavy negotiations with Europe, you need to know what your big industries are.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what they are, and how each individual deal affects those industries.
Well, I think he thinks, and they think they know what it is, but they've, as I said, they've lumped it into one thing. And they just sort of talk about it at the top line. So how did you sort of end up at ShowShoppa, and what sort of gave you the confidence that was a product and a business that was, I guess, going places?
Well, it was really difficult because I had some family issues that I, as everyone knows, at MASH, that I had to deal with. But at that time also I needed to still work, and I've been writing about the pandemic so I've gone on the BBC, I've shouted and screamed at everyone, I've been banging at doors. Every story I was writing was around the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then I remember I'd had a conversation with Brenda Hopday, who's the CEO of ShowShoppa, and I'd done a bit of work, a couple of pieces around what they were doing. I quickly realised that actually what they were doing was some really positive action that could really help organisers generate revenue, particularly around the pandemic. But equally at the same time, what ShowShoppa does is it kind of addresses that sort of evolution of the event business, and that was exciting to me. So I joined ShowShoppa on back 4 or 5 months ago.
Yeah, because I guess as well you had a unique position at EN during that period where you were talking to organisers. So obviously you're talking to trying to talk to government, but I guess you're speaking to organisers as well, who are thinking, oh my God, you know, what were they saying to you at the time? Actually, it'd be really interesting to hear, because I was one of those organisers at closest.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, everybody felt the same pain. You know, it's a terrible, terrible, terrible situation. Words cannot describe how bad it's been. And, you know, I've seen so many people that I admire that, you know, have lost their jobs, you know, and then you think about the impact on industry and the UK and looking at the kind of holistic problems linked to the pandemic and the event industry. Yes, organisers did what organisers do, incredibly creative, you know, and started looking at ways that they could engage with their audiences, and quite naturally went for the, you know, the low-hanging fruit, I suppose, and they started to create online or virtual events. Which is fantastic. You know, it's the right thing to do at that time, which is to ensure that your brand is connecting with the buyers or the visitors that come to your events. But what the big problem was that this, what seemed an obvious route in terms of keeping the brand alive or the event brand alive, wasn't necessarily the right route financially or the right route for exhibitors.
Yeah.
And, you know, we have to remember that it's the exhibitors that pay our wages, not the visitors. And these are our clients. These are the people we have to look after and ensure that they survive the pandemic. And, you know, a lot of these platforms, whether it be Grip or Hop-In or whatever they may be, they're fantastic at delivering brand experiences and keeping that experience alive, or your brand alive, in the mind of buyers. But where we come at it from ShowShoppa point of view is much more financially based. It's much more commercial. So we're not pretending to be anything but a commerce platform where event brands can sell either their products or services to buyers.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because as I said, my own experience, sort of late March, we got away our big tech show in Excel a week before lockdown. Clearly it wasn't as we wanted it to be, but we had passed the point of no return in terms of putting it on. And then we're trying to offer value to those exhibitors that either couldn't come or came, but obviously they didn't meet the same amount of people as before. We're also trying to generate revenue. And because also it depends on, I guess, the ownership of the business. So the business I was at was private equity owned. So I guess it's still like a commercial imperative. And so we did some virtual events, generated some money. And then obviously over the last 6 months, we've all been on events, and some are commercialized, some are not. And I guess it's been quite a challenge for organisers to think about, what do they do? As you say, you don't want to ruin the exhibitor experience. So, and then some are like, well, don't want to give too much away online, because when we come back to doing physical events, they might have got too used to it, and then not want to come back in person, and in person are higher margins. So I guess maybe some people have been telling you that when you've approached them, possibly, I don't know. It'd be interesting to know how you first approached, and I guess if you could separate it maybe between consumer and trade, it'd be interesting to see how those conversations how they've developed.
Yes, I mean, when you think about it, it's a really interesting subject, in the sense that what we have a natural evolution that's taking place, and I suspect that there's quite a few marketing people that agree with that view. The pandemic has accelerated what was going to happen naturally. Events are always going to be there. There's always going to be a face-to-face audience. There's a lot of technical products or physical products that need to be touched, felt, smelled, you know, whatever the case may be. But people need to kind of have that face-to-face interaction. But the problem lies really with next generations. And the reality is that we have I have three generations beneath me that live and die by these things. Yeah. And the reality is it's a generation, we have millennials that are, you know, making very significant buying decisions that don't actually leave their front room or their office pre-pandemic. And, you know, one of the things that I learned, particularly on EN, but probably pre that actually, because I remember building some very large forums in computer games way back. where we had 500,000 subscribers to like dial-up modem forums. So I've had experience of that over the last three decades, and what we are seeing is this seismic shift in buying. And at EN, as editor, I used to thoroughly enjoy hosting roundtables with a lot of really clever industry leaders and thinkers. And, you know, one of the things that I quite quickly realized, I remember dialing in live. We used to have these sort of live dial-ins as well as people around a table. And one company brought in the head buyer for IBM,
right,
who was based in Eastern Europe. And he was spending tens of millions of pounds every single year on exhibitions.
Yeah.
And he was a millennial.
Yeah.
And when I asked him a very simple question around, do you go to these shows? He said, absolutely not. So don't go to the shows. All I care about is ROI.
Yeah.
All I care about. If I can see ROI, I'll keep going. So he lives and dies by a spreadsheet, never leaves his office, stays working from where he is, and spends tens of millions of pounds. And this was a very early warning sign that this is the way things are going to go. And what I guess event organizers are doing, and there's I'm having some amazing conversations from very, very clever strategic people at some of the big event organizing companies, and they're restructuring, but they're planning ahead. They're thinking about running and creating another parallel market.
Yeah.
So they've got their events division, but they also need to have an online event division. They need to have the skills and the know-how and the ability to communicate with a wider audience. And no longer, this is the exciting part about the pandemic, no longer are we confined to a show that lasts for 3 days inside Excel or SEC or, you know, the NEC. Yeah. We can actually now market to those audiences 365. And that's one of the attractive things about ShowShoppa, because, you know, we know it works. I can't go into numbers, but we just launched a shop for Clarion.
Yeah, read that.
Spirit of Christmas. And that's been doing incredibly well. Now, that shop will only maybe exist for Christmas. It may be that Clarion decides they want to roll it out for the whole year. You know, and reinvent the wheel. But, you know, there's a real opportunity there. And we're signing deals with lots of different organisers every single day. It's an incredible time, because what I'm seeing is evidence that organisers are not just attempting to survive the pandemic, but are actually waking up to new marketplaces, new opportunities. And the reality is that when we think about shows, and I worked on Spring Fair, that was one of my shows that I headed up marketing wise. And I remember we've had, you know, a huge amount of pre-registrations. And of that, you get 50% of those would probably turn up, whatever the number is. But your actual database was significantly larger than that. And all of a sudden, what we have an opportunity to do now is to communicate with that larger database. I used to sit there, you know, every single show I do, I'd be worrying more. I wasn't worried about the people that turned up. I was more worried about the people that didn't turn up. That's what I spent my time obsessing around, to a point of, you know, being quite meticulous and ridiculous about it. So that's yeah.
Sorry, no. So it gives people, organisers, the opportunity as well to. So if they're communicating with them throughout the year, it should be reduced cost to acquire them for the next show, right? Because they've had a relationship with them, rather than having a disposable asset. They come to the show, don't speak to them again for another 10 months. That person might have moved on to another organisation. I'm talking about trade shows for a minute. And then you're sending them stuff and it's a waste, as opposed to knowing what they're doing. It's interesting because Hive just released their results and annual report today, literally about an hour before we came on. And Mark Shashua is talking about, you know, the word is omni-channel, right? So they've tested a load of stuff over the last 6 months. They're going to roll out the stuff that they feel was successful. But regarding Clarion, I've got a question for you, because an outsider looking in, I would say, okay, I'm a consumer. Why do I need a Clarion shop for Christmas stuff? There's so much already out there. So why would they be in a good position to sort of benefit from a shop?
We create these fantastic brands, that connect with customers. And if you think about it, it's a bit like sort of Nike, right? Yeah. So, everyone buys Nike trainers, but does everybody go to the shop? And in a way, you build brands and events, you build incredible brands, and you develop, apostles or people that love your product and are loyal to your brand and trust you. And the online communities, are very, the online shopping arena is a highly competitive industry. And, brands like Amazon, a lot of us buy from Amazon, of course, but there is something around trust. And I think Amazon could come unstuck going down the road, further down the road around, consumer confidence. There's a lot of companies that buy reviews, likes from China, you don't know what you're buying. And it's a bit of a gamble when you're buying a product on Amazon, whether it turns up and it's decent enough quality. So there is a growing trend of people that are really happy to buy from, brands that they trust. And it's no different with event brands. We build these incredible huge shows and you've got this massive following. So why not capitalize on that?
So, but as I understand it, and I've just played devil's advocate here, you can obviously set up your own shop within Amazon, right? So why would they choose to do it with a solution that you have rather than do that, in your opinion?
Well, I guess it goes back to the point I made earlier. I mean, if you set up a shop in Amazon, you're putting yourself back into that Amazon arena, back into that environment. Yeah. So you're putting yourself back into a competitive environment where, people will question quality. Actually, setting up a shop on Amazon isn't as cheap as people think.
Right.
There's, whether it's on Amazon or Etsy, these guys may dangle a very large carrot to say it's really, really cheap, 10, 15% or whatever commission. But the reality is, by the time they charge you for modules, marketing, add-ons, by the time they finish with you, you end up paying a fair old chunk if you want to get the best service out of your e-commerce.
And I guess you've got less control as well, I suppose.
You've got a lot less control. Why share your audience with a highly competitive platform? You're much better off keeping your audience where it should be, which is within your portfolio, within your product or your event brand. And that makes absolutely perfect sense. So, in a way, it's there's a lot of people that are really loyal to your brand, and I think what I am seeing is really positive evidence of organisers being a lot more confident about their brand and actually seeing the pandemic as an opportunity to seize greater market share. And that's really important as well, because, our landscape out there is changing at an exponential rate. We've got retailers going bankrupt every week.
Well, today there was an announcement again, just before we came on. I don't know if you've seen it, that Debenhams is closing, I believe.
Yeah.
And obviously Arcadia yesterday, it's in administration. So,
I mean, the list is endless. So our landscape in 2021 is going to look very, very different. And I hate to be the harbinger, but we're also facing a global recession.
Yeah.
And so there's a number of challenges, and a lot of big brands are talking about, and I'm not just talking about kind of, the event market. I'm talking about the kind of global, the Nikes and the Coca-Colas and so on. Their challenge, and what they're saying, is actually data is the big challenge for the next 3 years. And it's around being able to connect with people that are loyal to your brand, but find active buyers, which is the biggest challenge. So, anyone who's marketing events at the moment, they can send out an email.
Yeah.
And my guess is there's going to be quite a few bounce backs, because people are either on furlough, they've lost their jobs, their jobs changed, taken on more responsibility, which is another immediate change that's taking place in the marketplace. So actually, the reality is there's a real sort of data problem that's coming around the corner. And what ShowShoppa does is that it helps you to kind of, or building an e-commerce platform or shop, effectively helps you to kind of clean your data and actually track down active buyers that aren't on your database. And it allows you to be able to reach a much broader audience. But the other thing that I like about building a commerce platform is actually it creates a level playing field for your customers, for your exhibitors. And these guys, no different than, Philip Green or whoever it may be, they're not all going to be there in 2021, in 2022 and 2023. And, as an event organizer, my first priority would undoubtedly be protecting those brands and doing everything I can to drive as much business into those brands as I can to help them survive and weather the storm. Because when they come out of it the other side, they're going to show you through their loyalty, through their gratitude, immense loyalty, and they're going to stick with your brand and stick with you, in the good times as well as the bad.
So, thank you. Yeah, and I've obviously seen that you work with trade show organisers as well. Or is it... So what we... How does that translate? Because obviously they're not selling, a product.
So what we do is we have a B2C version of the product, which is up and running, and then we have a B2B version of the product, which has a couple of additional elements that we've added to it. And one of those is a inquiry form, but also kind of looking at sort of all the kind of parameters that a trade show needs. So ways of kind of connecting with people, and being able to hold meetings or arrange meetings or make inquiries about products.
So it's not just e-commerce. You're working with organisers.
Absolutely, and then and the way that works is it's fully trackable. So if you get you get a 350 leads, you can measure those over 365 days or within a short window through the back office. But what we are seeing, and this goes back to that original point we're talking about, is that buyer behaviour is changing, and we anticipate through the B2B platform, we're chatting to quite a few major players in the business around producing a B2B version of, launching a B2B version for their portfolios, is that we're going to see a lot of people buying quite happily, over using the e-commerce shop to purchase products at wholesale. So of course there'll be entry systems like membership and logging in and so on, because we're not about to sort of reveal what a product costs to to a retailer. But ultimately, or a buyer. But ultimately, that platform is there to measure either leads, or it can measure physical sales as well. And that's the beauty of it. But we're not pretending to be anything else. It's all about money, and it's about making sure that people can kind of connect and just do it really simply. And by creating these massive directories, you actually strengthen your brand position. You create these vast resources that buyers can actually flock to find the products they're looking for. Yeah,
and I think what you're trying to get people to think about then is quite a quantum leap to go from running a show to becoming an e-commerce business. Because organisers provide the forum for people to do business, but typically they're not transacting themselves with obviously with their visitors. So what in your opinion, in terms of practical, what are the best tips you can give people if they want to sort of start this process of like potentially becoming an e-commerce player?
Yeah, it's not actually as complicated as it may seem, and I'd argue that there are a few small leaps.
Yeah,
this industry is more than capable of handling it, and we've seen evidence of that through the shops we're launching at the moment. Evidently, what you need to do is you need to think about the ShowShoppa does a lot of the onboarding work. So we take a huge amount of that sort of strain and responsibility out of someone. So if you think about this sort of infrastructure, you really need quite a lot of similarities to running an actual event. The only additional element you need, so you'll need a portfolio director or a head of that particular brand. You need somebody in sales who's going to communicate to the exhibitors and say, look, hey, we're going to launch a shop. You're interested? 9 times out of 10, they'll come back to you and say, yes, please, because they are desperate. They're in exactly the same situation that we're in their industries. So, they 9 times out of 10, they say, yeah. And then we are then notified of the people that want to come into the shop. We have a really detailed, highly professional sort of onboarding process that takes place. We can build a shop within 5 weeks. That's literally how long we've been able to, for Clarion, for a show that's got 800 exhibitors,
Wow.
We built it in 5 weeks.
And does the exhibitor have to have their own online portal or shop already, or
no? Not
so
all.
actually you're helping them become an e-commerce player.
Yeah, and it's really funny. You'll get lots of different scenarios. So we all know that you've got to handhold exhibitors. You've got to look after them. Not all of them are tech savvy. That's why you have a team at ShowShoppa that can actually help to kind of handhold an exhibitor through that process, and to a point almost build their shop for them.
Yeah.
We've got online training, videos, live webinars that people can join and ask questions. But the bit that really kind of is interesting, you get all these wonderful anecdotes. So we've got like one shop where we've got a farmer who sells veal. And he's like, he's got no idea how to do this sort of thing. So we help him to do that, and then he can sell his products to the database of buyers. But the only other thing you probably need is somebody. Let's be clear on this. Most of the event marketers in this business are digitally savvy. They know how to run a paid social campaign. They know how to drive visitors into a website. So all they're doing really is driving visitors into their shop. And the great thing about a shop is it sits, it's a URL, so you can sit anywhere. You can sit on a website. But the thing that I love about it is just watching. The appetite for shops is huge from exhibitors. It doesn't matter who they are, whether it's services, B2B, B2C, whatever the market is. They need to trade. They're desperate to trade, and these guys are struggling, just like event organisers and global brands, to find the active buyers and the people who are actually buying, because so many people have changed roles. So the part that the event organisers play in that process it can't be underestimated. It's huge.
And what's the commercial model? Are they passing costs back to the exhibitors? Is it a percentage of what they sell? How does it work?
There's loads of different ways organisers can do it. So, an organiser could offer a shop as added value, because the actual cost of putting together a shop with us is very low. So they can offer it as added value if they want to, so that, they offer a lifeline to exhibitors.
Yeah. They
can set up a very serious business model where they, charge a commission on all sales, which is no different than the environments of a lot of these companies.
Used to that, yeah.
And it's a fantastic way to generate revenue. But the exciting part is actually turning it into not just a 365 model, but suddenly becoming a brand that has no barriers. You can trade internationally. You can massively increase your database tenfold just by building a shop environment for people to trade in.
So in terms of the future of events, let's look at consumer shows, right? So I've spoken to lots of people in this space. Some think people won't have a problem going to a show like that because a consumer show typically might be quite specialist. And actually people are desperate to go back to shows. So I was talking to Mike Seaman about the running show, and they announced an outdoor show and snow show that he's doing. And even right in the pandemic, when they announced it, he got thousands of people signing up to join it. And this is like in August for Q2 next year. In your opinion, then, how do you see these shows coming back? And then I know we spoke about it a bit in terms of the hybrid model. What does that sort of look like for you?
I mean, in the B2C market, I think these shows will come back.
Yeah.
Fairly swiftly, but there's always going to be I guess in a way there's going to be a little bit of apprehension around people going back to these events. There are so many things that people have been denied over the last year, whether it be going to the cinema or spending an evening with pub with your friends or going on holiday. I mean, there are so many things that we've actually not been able to do. So in a way, B2C events are going to be competing with that kind of, change in the marketplace.
Yeah.
In the short term, we haven't got an overnight fix. This is going to take a little while for this problem to go away. Yeah, sure, we've got a vaccine, which is the best news in the world. But I think it'll take a little while for people to come back. And there'll be a few amazing success stories in B2C, but equally there'll be some shows that will struggle to pull in the numbers. And I guess in a way in the B2B markets, that may be even a bigger challenge, because getting people to jump on an aeroplane, you're going to have pockets of you know, with sort of problems with the pandemic, and you know, sort of where it flares up in different regions. So it's going to be very difficult for people to sort of drive to one event and visit that event, or fly.
Yeah, you've also got the companies themselves in the corporate environment who will still be cautious to let their staff go to an event, because it's one thing the government in a region saying, yeah, you can go. I mean, we had it. So in March, lockdown hadn't begun yet, but 10 days prior, people were stopping people going to events. Insurance and all sorts of stuff, right? So I think consumers different. They can just get up and make their own risk choices.
They can. Yeah. And you've got that sort of, you've also got that added problem of and again, this is this horrible sword hanging over our heads, which is this global recession.
Yeah.
You know, and all these brands and companies that, you know, it's not just your exhibitors, your visitors that also work for companies. Some of those companies aren't going to be there. Some of those companies are cutting back costs on travel. Some of those companies are cutting back staff numbers, investment, you know, you name it. There's going to be all sorts of headaches around around a recession that we've had to fight through, I think, you know, back in 2008, 2011. So we're going to have to go through that whole process again. So actually building a hybrid model, or effectively building a way to reach customers and continue trading actively, is essential, because the ROI for your exhibitors is going to plummet. And, you know, for those guys, they really are going to be looking to event organizers to, you know, deliver similar numbers of leads, you know, that they've experienced pre-pandemic. And I think probably the most logical way to do that is by building 365 platforms and actually delivering, you know, trade all 365 days a year. I also think it's a little bit, I mean, I love shows and they're never going to go, but I also think it's a little bit, possibly a little bit naive for us to work in the same formula over and over again, where we're cramming events into 3 days. We should be trading. The world has moved on. We're globally trading all over the world, and I think that's the next step in our evolution, is to start trading 365. You know, have a great.
I just think organisers have had it good for so long, or a lot of them have, right? A lot of them are sold for big multiples. Private equity have come in, mostly. I'm talking about the UK in the last 10 or 15 years. So people have been quite happy doing what they're doing, and actually, you know, incremental revenues for the other 9 months of the year. Well, yes, but it's a lot of effort. Not going to generate, you know, compared to the show, tiny amount. So why would I do it? But I guess this has forced us to at least think about having that conversation. I'm personally still a little bit skeptical that some of the organisers would do that, and actually, I'm talking B2B now mostly.
Yeah, well, actually, that's a really good point, Dan.
And I'm hoping that, you know, we're going to go back to the way it was.
Do you know what worries me a little bit?
Yeah.
There are some very, very absolutely brilliant organisers that are now thinking about their structure and their business model. And any CEO worth his weight in gold is now in the process of planning what to do if this happens again. And he needs to have a backup plan, he or she.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's their head on the chopping block. If we have a flare up again, or we get COVID-20, or whatever happens next, if that business is not prepared to trade offline, then I'm sorry, they should have their job.
Yeah.
And that's the way I see it. So, you know, businesses need to have a really robust 365 trading platform. Yes, keep engaging with brands through hybrid events, you know, keep engaging with visitors through that process, but build a commercial model, because, you know, it pays. We know it pays. I can see the numbers on spreadsheets. I know it's working, and the markets are moving and changing. And with this period of uncertainty, it's a no-brainer. It makes absolutely perfect sense to just build a really simple e-commerce platform, let your visitors trade, find new people, discover new active users. And build your databases, you know, rebuild those databases so that you can reach people from all over the world. And of course, the best part about it is, as you build your database with new buyers, you can funnel that back into your event. So, you know, it's a win-win, because you've got a new, fresh batch of people to convert to drive them to visit your show. And the reality is that if people are buying from your brand in a shop, there is already some loyalty there.
Yeah.
So the conversion process to get that person who buys regularly from you in your shop environment to come and see your show is a much easier journey than having to kind of convert somebody who's never seen your brand before.
No, agreed. Cool. So I think we've covered most. Is there anything else you want to cover before I do my sort of finishing bit?
I think that's it for me, mate.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you one last question, which I tend to do, which is my desert island question. If you're happy to answer it, which will be what 2 or 3 people from the industry, either recent or past, you would take on the desert island. I've got a desert island channel on my YouTube channel, so the likes of Ed Tranter and others have given me their views. You happy to do that?
Yeah, I can tell you I'd take on my...
Cool. So let me just intro that. So Saul, finally, it'd be great if you can answer my desert island question. So which 2 or 3 people and why from the industry that you've had the joy of working with would you take on a desert island?
You know what? The first one's got to be Rob Nathan. And a little birdie tells me that he's rapidly approaching his 50th birthday. Definitely Rob, because one, he's a smart guy. I consider Rob to be one of my mentors in this industry. And he took me under my wing at a very early part of my career. But he's also incredibly funny.
Yeah.
And he just makes me laugh. And you know what? If I'm stuck on an island, I may as well be happy, right? So Rob would be certainly one of those people. But there's lots of people I'd take on an island for lots of different reasons. But I think Rob Nathan is the one that I'd choose. Cool, perfect. So thank you so much. We look forward to hearing more news of other show organisers that sign up to ShowShoppa, and obviously new features that are going to come out in the next few months. Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Dan. It's great.